Taken China in population. That's right, we are officially more than the Chinese. Demographic Boon or Bane, that's going to be the big talking point. Also, is India really ready for same-sex marriage? Some of the petitioners will be joining me tonight on the news today. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. India surpasses China to become the world's most populous nation with over 142 crore people. India now has 3 million people more than China. 4 big nominations in poll-bound Karnataka. Bomai, Siddaramaiah, Jagdish Shettar, B.Y. Vijendra gear up for the big fight. Stage set for high-stakes Karnataka election. A week after the BJP releases a DMK files alleging 2,000 crore worth assets acquired through corruption by Chief Minister Stalin and family, legal notice sent to the state BJP chief seeking 50 crores in damages. Yogi Adityanath holds key meeting over missing Guddu Muslim and Atiq's wife Shaista. Chief Minister asks cops to intensify hunt for the two. The police get 4-day remand of Atiq shooters. Same-sex hearing in Supreme Court. Centre files a fresh affidavit, says all states must be made a party. Petitioners in court say majority doesn't define what's normal. No events to be allowed in Maharashtra in open spaces between noon and 5 p.m. until the heat conditions become lesser. This after 14 people were killed attending a rally in Raigad district over the weekend. Fierce fighting rages on in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum. Over 1,500 Indians stranded. External Affairs Minister Shankar speaks to Saudi and UAE counterparts who've assured aid to repatriate Indians. Apple CEO Tim Cook meets Prime Minister Modi in Delhi, says Apple committed to growing and investing across India. And Meta set to start laying off 10,000 employees from tonight. Memo indicates workers will be fired at Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram and Reality Labs.
India overtakes China in population. Population higher by 2.9 million by mid-2023. China's population shrunk for first time in 60 years. Working age population to cross 100 crore in 10 years. Can India find jobs for its workforce? Is there a need for population control? Demographic dividend or disaster?
That's right, our top story tonight. India has become the world's most populous country officially, overtaking China with almost 3 million more people. The data released today by the United Nations Population Fund has estimated India's population at 1.4286 billion against 1.4257 billion for China. So India has edged ahead. According to the latest data, the United States is a distant third with an estimated population of 340 million. The data reflects information available as of February 2023. However, UN population officials have said it is impossible to specify a particular date where this has happened due to uncertainty over the data. Remember, India's last census was conducted in 2011 and the next one due in 2021 has been delayed due to the pandemic. So the big story is coming in on the population front. Take a look at the numbers. Population clock. Now, 2023, India, as I said, edging ahead, as you can see with those numbers, 1.4286 billion as contrasted to China's 1.4257 billion. How is this worked out? In 1950, India was 357 million, China was 544, well ahead. By 1960, the gap was still substantial. India 446 million, China 654 million. By 1970, India was 558 million, China still well ahead, 823 million. By 1980, India was 697, China 982. This is when China brings in that decade, the one-child policy, and you can see the change. Now, India is at 870 million by 1990. China is at 1154 million. In 2000, India is at 1,060 million, China at 1264 million. 2010, India has crossed, of course, the billion mark, 1.241, China 1.348. The gap is narrowing. And now in 2023, India has streaked ahead slightly of China, 1.429 billion versus 1.426. And the estimation is at this rate, these population rates, India will be 1.670 billion by 2050. China will be 1.313 billion. So clearly, India now moving well ahead of China. Let's raise the big question. Is this population rise a boon or a bane? Is it reason to celebrate or to worry? Should India be controlling population through legislation, as some have suggested? Just some of the questions I'm going to raise tonight. We're joined by Poonam Muthreja, Executive Director at the Population Foundation of India, Manish Sabarwal, Vice Chairman, Team Lease Services, Uday Shankar Mishra is a statistician and demographer, and Santosh Mehrotra is development economist. I appreciate all of you joining us, and I'll come to each of you for initial comments, starting with you, Manish Sabarwal. Your first reactions to that initial question I'm posing, is this a boon or bane? Should we be worried today or celebrating?
I mean, it's neither a boon or a bane. It depends on what we do with it. I mean, population, in some sense, we should be proud that democracy panned out, right? China in the 1970s enforced one-child policy practically at gunpoint, and in the next 5 years, it will lose a working age population equal to France. So I'm not sure China will be celebrating their premature aging, which is the consequence of theirs. India, there was an attempt to forcefully control population in the 1970s. So at some level, population control should not be a bulb that goes on or a bulb that goes off. It should be a gentle sunrise and sunset. So at some level, today's us crossing China is a more organic population control. I mean, economic growth, women's rights, and education are the best ways to control population. So I think, is it a boon or a bane? Depends on what we do with it in the next 25 years. But I think it is an accomplishment of democracy that we have not used methods that I think in the long run don't work.
Okay, I'm going to come to more specifics in a moment, Manish. But first, Poonam Muthreja, your initial comments. Should this be a day to celebrate or to worry?
Neither. I would say neither. Let's look at it as an opportunity, but also let's look at it as a situation where India's fertility is declining. We have overtaken China, but 24 states have reached replacement level, which means and 2 children are replacing 2 parents. That's what I'm referring to as replacement level. And second, India, even in the northern parts of India where fertility was high, we've cracked it. Without the big investments in education and health in the north, we have brought down fertility rates in UP as well as Bihar. So I'd like to say that India's fertility is on India's stabilizing. It's just that we have a large population which can be converted as a dividend if we seriously work on investing in skills, we work on investing in employability and at good wages. Half the problem is that wages are very low in India. Third, I would like to say that India should be very proud that we have done what we have done in terms of the fertility decline without doing what China did or without coercive measures. And finally, there is a world out there which is today really seeing themselves in economic and demographic trouble because their fertility has gone down enormously, and they will not have people to
Right.
work in their countries, and India will benefit from this large number of young people, and we must invest in them.
I'll come to that as well, but Uday Shankar Mishra, as a statistician, demographer, as Poonam Mutreja pointed out, 24 states have reached replacement levels. So effectively, 24 states have really got their population numbers under control. But you have two very large states, Bihar in particular, where again there's a decline, but not as substantial in some other states, and Uttar Pradesh. Is this now therefore to be seen not as even the entire population scenario, not to be seen as an India crisis, but a more specific Hindi heartland crisis even now?
Yes, Rajdeep, and I would rather term the scenario that you described as the demographic diversity of India, because demographic diversity of India places certain parts of it behind in the transition process and certain parts ahead in the transition process. In fact, this gives us a big benefit in a way, because given the demographic diversity, a region of our country, the southern region, is particularly they are quite ahead. If you look at the southern India, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and other states where replacement level of fertility, we are going below that. So where the workforce actually is putting a pressure, because there is a required workforce for a population to sustain itself, to keep itself productive economically, and that vacuum is perhaps getting filled in by the diversity that we have from other regions of the country. That is one. Second, if you read in recent times, I have actually drafted a very interesting book called Demographic and Development Divide in India. Though I tell it there is a divide which is observable, this divide does not go against the sustainability of population with relation to the kind of expected development trajectory that we are looking forward to. And as rightly my co-panelist Poonam put it, that we need to make this population, rather than celebrating or thinking that's a disaster, I would say this population we must invest in terms of generating capabilities that the global outlook of this workforce should be positive.
You know, you're saying invest in this population. One of the concerns, of course, Manish Sabharwal, is labor participation. Look at China versus India. It's even worse when it comes to women, well up below average for other Asian countries, especially from East Asia. Should that be the focus? How do we get more people in the labor workforce? How do we create more employability, productive employability, not just jobs, but productive jobs? Should that be seen as the big challenge? China at 67% versus India at 49% is a substantial gap.
Sure, but they're also much older. So I think absolutely the 3 E's of education, employment, and employability are the single agenda for the next 25 years. But obviously, framing this problem in the last 5-10 years, the debate about unemployment has been really a waste of time, because we need higher productivity. Employed poverty is India's problem. So we need to raise the productivity of our states. You know, I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP, they have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. If you think about cities, I mean, Bangalore versus other places, if you think about sectors, 40% of our labor force in agriculture. But I think, land labor capital has never been India's problem. It is how they combine. You could give every Indian household half an acre, they would fit into Haryana and Rajasthan. Capital, we have 50% of India's foreign direct investment since 1947 has come in the last 5 years. So I would say women's labor force participation, we have hit bottom, it is turning. There's massive foreign investment. So if you think about sort of broad indicators of education, employment, and employability, we're not where we should be, but there's been massive improvement. So I would say that there's a bunch of luck that India also has, right? The China luck, the factories that refugees who are running away from China, the digitization luck that was accelerated by COVID. And of course, the manufacturing luck, which, we only have 11% of our labor force in manufacturing, which is the same as the US. So the only side is up. So I would say, yes, the productivity of our states, cities, sectors, and firms and individuals, which is skills, as Poonam said. If we focus on that, there's no question that we can become the workshop to the world and the service economy to the world.
Santosh Mehrotra, are you as positive that we could actually use this large population base, this young population, particularly in contrast? I'll put up some numbers which will contrast India's youth population versus that of China. Could we use that, as some suggest, as this great dividend? Or do you believe it's a disaster waiting to happen?
It's a disaster waiting to happen because we have not invested in either the health or the education of our people. Although we have managed to universalize secondary education pretty much, but are we being able to generate the jobs? Well, the economy is not growing fast enough. We might have become, after COVID, the fastest growing large economy in the world, but we've been the second fastest growing large economy in the world for the last 15 years. Fact of the matter is, we have only 15 to 17 years more left in our demographic dividend, after which we will become an aging society. It is a disaster waiting to happen because A, we haven't invested in health and education. This government, despite making a commitment to increasing health expenditure to GDP, is stuck at 1.3% of GDP. The National Health Policy of 2017 said that by 24-25, we will get to 2.5% of GDP. Have we made any effort in that direction? None at all, despite COVID having intervened. Secondly, we are still spending 2.9% of GDP on education. When we are way behind China, in terms of educational levels or skill levels, as a result of which work and factories which are exiting China are going to Vietnam, Bangladesh and Cambodia. They're not coming to India. I mean, just because we get one Windstorm and one Apple coming here, we start patting ourselves in the back. So the fact of the matter is, we are going to be an aging society like China became about 8-10 years ago. And by the way, it's a complete mistake for people in India to believe that we should have a national law about how many children to have. China did not reduce its birth rate on account of the one-child policy of 1983. They had managed to reduce their birth rate long before that because they invested in the health and education of their people.
Let me take that particular point, because there is one of the questions we've raised is, should we have a law? The moment this morning the news broke that we've gone ahead of China, typically social media was abuzz saying, we need a law, we need a population control law. Some states have already brought out a draft, Uttar Pradesh being one of them. Poonam Mutreja is someone who represents an organization that looks at these issues. Do you believe that population legislation is required, or are we moving generally in the right direction by focusing on education, and that alone will bring down the numbers, and it's bringing down the numbers across communities importantly?
So, Rajdeep, the last thing India should be doing is any laws or any legislation. You cannot do this to women. Women's bodies cannot be targets for any population, but for any politician. Though this happens all the time in India and many other countries, it makes me angry.
So you don't agree with the Uttar Pradesh law that links it to incentives, create incentives? Okay. Do you believe incentives work?
Incentives are not necessary if you look at India's data. In India, when NFHS shows people do not wish to have more than 2 children. The average wanted fertility in India is 1.8. So given that, why do you need to give incentives unless you have a lot of money? Look at the family planning program. We spend 85% of our budget, meager budget, as Santosh said, on sterilization and giving targets. We don't need that. We need to get our priorities right, give a large population of young people spacing methods, and they want family planning. They need contraceptives. The aspirations, one thing I'd like to say to Santosh is, the aspirations of the young woman especially, but all young people are very different. They aspire not only to be educated, but they want to marry late, they want to have fewer children. If that is the reality, where is the need for any incentives? And as far as disincentives go, it is a political statement, Rajdeep, that all these people make. They know the data. They know that Muslim growth is the fastest declining in India. I want to add a positive thing that the government has done, which is they've shown in 146 backward districts, which are high fertility with interventions like good family planning services and counseling, they've been able to bring down fertility under this Mission Parivar Vikas.
So
Government knows this better. It's the politicians
So you're
who
saying-
are using
You're
numbers
saying
to
you're
divide
saying no
society.
need for incentives, disincentives. No,
Absolutely.
the UP proposed law was that if you wanted a government job, you would have to show that you had 2 children. You're saying no need for any of those incentives, disincentives.
Absolutely, and
You're
that law
importantly
has gone
saying
nowhere. It's floundering.
okay, and Muslim growth rates you're saying are declining now even more than those of other communities. So that's an important fact.
Absolutely.
Santosh Mehrotra, you raised your finger, so I'll let you respond and then I'll come to you there. Yes, Santosh.
Yeah. No, yeah. Firstly, Poonam is absolutely spot on. We don't need any incentives. We don't need any law. I want to tell you of a survey that was done by the Nandi Foundation in 2018 of 70,000 teenage girls between the ages of 13 and 19 across 20 states. And the question was asked, what age do you want to marry? Please remember, all girls have now gotten education at least until age 16, in other words, class 10. These girls, the legal marriage age is 18 years. 25% said we want to marry between the ages of 18 and 20, and another 51% said we want to marry between the ages of 20 and 25. What does that mean? You don't need a law. Girls already have gotten the education. They want to work. They want to marry late. There is no need for this. What they need is quality health services, quality reproductive health services at the lowest level being provided by primary health centers and sub-centers.
So you're calling
that
for greater
unmet
investment
need for health.
Sure, you're calling for greater investment in primary health centers as a critical factor rather than this incentives, disincentives. I just want Uday Shankar Mishra as a demographer to just clarify that. Because again on social media, there is this belief that Muslims are the ones responsible for India's high population today. That's the kind of narrative that's spread. You want to clarify that? Is it now clear that across communities in India and even across states, to varying degrees there, population fertility levels are on the decline?
In fact, I would fully agree with Santosh and Poonam on one count, but I must give an explanation to this effect, the myth which goes around fertility decline being different. I would like to emphasize that actually the convergence in fertility decline is significant across not merely the groups that you're talking of in terms of religion or something, any characteristics you take, characteristics convergence in fertility decline is significantly high. In addition to that, I would like to say that the proximate determinants, the attributes that actually help in fertility decline, if we look at the general population, if we look at the majority population, the response on education on fertility decline is perhaps much more higher in the minority group than it is in the other group. So, what I would like to emphasize is that it is not, it's completely unnecessary to engage with a debate of population control law or kind of a regulation to be put in place or incentivizing this process.
Okay, so we've importantly settled that at least on this show. You don't need a population law. You just need to invest much more in primary health services, in education, particularly for women. But Manish Sabarwal, to come back to something that Professor Mehrotra seemed to disagree with you. He's worried that there's a disaster waiting to happen, that in 15 years we're going to be an aging society, and an aging society where increasingly in the age of automation, there may be fewer jobs, fewer productive jobs, employment, the soft skills that you need may not be there. Is that a worry that you have, that we will consistently, need to grow at 8.5% over the next decade? Productivity growth will need to increase to 6.5 to 7%. And more importantly, education standards will have to rise.
In the 1970s, there was a professor at Stanford, Paul Ehrlich. He wrote a book called The Population Bomb, saying that we won't be able to give healthcare, education, and jobs, so we should have a good famine in India and let 100 million people die. He was wrong for various reasons. And I know obviously optimists sound like we're selling you something and pessimists sound like they're protecting you. But I'm quite clear that over the next 25 years will be very different economically from the last 25. There's a bunch of luck. I'm not saying it's all skill. You know, life is a beauty contest. You don't have to be Noor Jahan. You just have to be less ugly than your competitors. I think there's a bunch of luck and skill and choices that are increasing the economic tempo. It's the best time. As a first generation entrepreneur, I'm not happy with the regulatory cholesterol that still exists, but it's much less than what it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So at least my belief is that this is not a disaster. We can obviously reduce the gap between our aspirations and our reality, but we're doing it. And, you know, at a certain level, democracy, in my mind, was quite clearly responsible for us not doing what China did. So there are fixed costs of democracy in economics, in reforms. I think we have digested them. So I don't believe it's a demographic disaster. And I think the next 25 years will be very different from the last 25 for young people's opportunities. And just as a time to start a company, the capital, the opportunities that are available today to first generation entrepreneurs did not exist 20, 30 or 10 years ago.
Okay, Santosh, you want one final word on that? Manish Sabarwal, much more positive over the next 25 years. Yes, quickly, sir.
Yeah. Well, I think he doesn't work on demography, so let me give you a sense of how rapidly the working age population is rising and how between now and 2030, we will be adding 5 to 8 million new young workers into the labor force. In addition, we have to pull workers out of agriculture. In addition, we have to provide work for unemployed people, and we have to provide work for all the young girls who have gotten educated. And this is going to happen at an accelerating pace. The youth joining the labor force is going to happen at an accelerating pace between now and 2030. And after 2030, it will still be increasing, those in the working age, though it will be at a decelerating pace. The point is, we are not generating jobs at anywhere close to the rate at which we need to now. And the only way we will generate jobs, if we think about labor-intensive manufacturing and we up the rate of growth from its current 6-7% to at least 8 to 9%. If we don't maintain the 8 to 9% over the next 10 years, we are building up to a disaster.
Okay. You know, in a sense, therefore, these are the two alternative perspectives there over what lies ahead. Let me just get, therefore, final comment, starting with you, Poonam Muthreja. Given what you're hearing, the contrary views, what would you see the scenario 10 years from now? Do you believe 10 years from now, we will be in a better space, having virtually reached reproductive levels across Indian states, including UP and Bihar? Are you hopeful of that? Or do you believe the gaps will widen?
Absolutely. I think fertility decline will be at a faster rate in India. That's one. Two, there is going to be opportunities, frankly, both in India and outside India, given the declining population. You'll say there's a brain drain. But Indian government has already signed an agreement, for instance, with Japan, and is talking to other countries about them investing in our skill development and education. And I think that is the way ahead, because Indians will leave, skilled Indians will leave to go out.
So
third, I want to say that given the aspirations of the young women, they are going to go for higher education, they are going to go for marrying late, exercising their autonomy. Finally, this is a wake-up call for Government of India.
Okay, you're putting it, when you say that, there will be this aspirational class, Mr. Mishra, Professor Mishra, is there a worry that when we talk of aspirational classes, we forget the vast inequalities that exist income class-wise, that there will be a class that, will continue in a way to lag behind. They may still produce more, and it is the more affluent, the middle class, which is the one which has fewer children. Is there a worry that this widens? Is there any data to show that the poorer you are in India, the more likely you are to produce more children? And could that happen more routinely in the future as well?
Well, I mean, in this regard, I did write a commentary some time back about the inequality implication of low fertility, because the low fertility transition takes place as a kind of transition between the well-off and the poor, being well-off being ahead in the transition, and the poor as like demonstratively follow it. Having said that, I would say I would agree with. I would not place myself in this binary of pessimism and optimism regarding what Santosh puts it as, unemployment situation which are threatening. I will not counter that, but I would definitely say that the aspirational level itself is giving rise to unemployment, and we should take note of this aspiration as, in Manish's words, the aspiration with regard to the wage people are expecting, aspirations with regard to the kind of employment, the quality of employment people are expecting. I think these are parameters to be attended to if we want that unemployment figures, as which Santosh warns us about, has to be somewhat optimistically to be looked at.
Manish, final word. Are you worried about income inequality is only widening, given, as I said, the fact that data does suggest poorer, lower income families more inclined to have more children?
I mean, if you threw the 5 richest people in India into the Indian Ocean, India's income inequality would reduce. I don't think it would improve the lot of the poor. I think what India needs is more urbanization, more formalization, more industrialization, more financialization, and more human capital. We are very far from the productivity frontier. The agenda is quite clear. Obviously, there's a difference between the list of ingredients and the recipe, and the magic lies in proportioning and sequencing these reforms. But I think that at least I would bet on India's new tryst with destiny, the new appointment that we're making. I think we'll meet it.
Okay, new tryst with destiny. Nice word to end on. Maybe that is a more positive note. I know it's important to have Professor Mehrotra there giving that word of caution, because we tend to at times only look at life very optimistically. There are good signs in these numbers, and there are continuing concerns also that remain. I appreciate my guests joining us, particularly because you've lived up to what we have a tagline on this show, news without the noise. More importantly, knowledge is what all 4 of you have given us on the show today. I hope we can have many more such knowledgeable debates on critical issues like population. Thank you all very much for joining me on the show tonight. Let's take a break at this point, or sorry, not a break, but let's move on to our next story, which is Karnataka and the election battle of Karnataka.
Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Co-powered by Jaguar. Discover the magic of smart lights.
Okay, the high decibel campaigning by political parties now heating up as the Karnataka Assembly polls draw closer. Today, Karnataka witnessed one of the busiest nomination days. All the big faces of Karnataka filed their nomination today. Obviously, the stars were aligned. While the BJP President JP Nadda, actor Kicha Sudeep accompanied Karnataka Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai for his nomination from Shigaon. Leader of the opposition Siddaramaiah filed his nomination from Varuna in Old Mysore. BJP turncoat former Karnataka Chief Minister Jagdish Shettar too filed his nomination from Hubli Dharwad, that he's won 6 times, this time on a Congress ticket. Son of senior BJP leader and former Karnataka Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa also held a mega road show in Shikaripura.
आप बताइए पीएफ फाइल पर बैन लगा रहना चाहिए कि नहीं लगा रहना चाहिए? अगर लगा रहना चाहिए तो कमल के निशान पर बटन दबाना होगा। अगर सिद्धारमैया और शिव कुमार क्या बोल रहे हैं? वो बोल रहे हैं कि हम आएंगे तो पीएफआई से बैन उठा लेंगे। बताइए उन्होंने 170 केस वापस लिए थे कि नहीं लिए थे? 1700 लोगों को छोड़ा था कि नहीं छोड़ा था? यहाँ क्रिमिनल लोगों की एक्टिविटी बढ़ी थी कि नहीं बढ़ी थी? और बोमई साहब के राज में क्रिमिनल एक्टिविटी बंद हुई है, और जो क्रिमिनल थे वो जेल के पीछे है। इस बात को भी याद रखना चाहिए।
Let him see if Sudeep or anybody campaign along with Nadda, it makes no difference at all, because people have already decided to vote Congress party and to bring back the Congress party to power.
Okay, so the battle lines drawn in Karnataka. But an interesting aspect of Karnataka this time is the election being localized, especially by the Congress party. The latest local factor is the fact that a war in Sudan is now resonating in Karnataka. Why? Because there are many Kannadigas who are stuck in the civil war torn country, and the delay in rescuing them has become an election issue in battleground Karnataka. It's our ground report.
Gunfire, explosions and bombings. These are the images from Sudan, where a civil war is raging between the army and a rival militia. Nearly 200 people have died in the violence so far, including an Indian who was caught in a crossfire. Several Indians are stranded in the capital, Khartoum, as clashes intensify.
खाने को भी नहीं और पानी को भी नहीं। अभी मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ हम क्या खा रहे हैं। अभी दिखाता हूँ। ये यहाँ से 4 दिन से लेके आके रखे हैं। ये सूखा रोटी। ये जो पानी आता ना, पानी में डुबा के आदमी पीट एक खा के, एक इंसान एक खा के और गुजारा कर रहे हैं।
ನೋಡಿ ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟವಾಗಿದೆ. ಇನ್ನು ಶೂಟ್ ಔಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಹೊರಗೆ ಬಂದಿದ್ವಿ ರೇಷನ್ ತಗೊಳಕ್ಕೆ. ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ. ಶೂಟ್ ಔಟ್ ಚಾಲು ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅಂಗಡಿಗಳು ಓಪನ್ ಆಗಿದ್ವು. ಒಂದು ರೇಷನ್ ತಗೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿದ್ವಿ.
Eyewitnesses described the scenes across the Sudanese capital.
Their 24 hours on ceasefire agreement looks so fake because they started fighting again.
ಅಂಗಡಿ ಒಂದೇ ಓಪನ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಮತ್ತೆ ಶೂಟ್ ಆಗ್ತಾನೆ ಇದೆ.
Among the Indians stranded in Sudan are more than 30 Hakki-Pikki tribals, a nomadic community in Karnataka which goes to elections next month. The Congress has hit out at the BJP government, both at the centre and in the state, for not doing enough to rescue the Indians. There was a sharp exchange of words on Twitter between State Leader of Opposition Siddaramaiah and External Affairs Minister S. Shankar, who accused the Congress of playing politics. Siddaramaiah slammed the centre for delaying action in bringing the Indians back, pointing out many Indians are stranded without food. Shankar said the centre is in continuous touch with the Indian embassy in Khartoum.
Our residents of Karnataka, they have been demanding food, shelter, security and a safe return. But Prime Minister and Home Minister are busy politicking. Foreign Affairs Minister of India has no clue. That is the indifference and apathy they have for the members of Hakki-Pikki tribe.
The civil war in Sudan has sparked international outcry and a crisis in Africa, with many nations closing borders with Sudan, making any rescue efforts tougher. Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, let's turn from there to our other focus tonight. 5 years after decriminalizing homosexuality, India's apex court is hearing pleas on a day-to-day basis in a constitution bench to legalize same-sex marriages or not. The centre is opposing it, calling it an urban elitist concept. The top court, though, is refusing to admit any absolute definition of man and woman. What happened today in the court? Take a look.
After the historic takedown of Section 377, decriminalizing homosexuality, one would have thought the progression to equal rights in India has begun. Next in line would be legalizing same-sex marriage. The government on the issue of decriminalizing homosexuality had left it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court to take a stand or a call on consensual gay sex, or Section 377. One would have thought the government would do the same when it came to same-sex marriages. Not quite. Firmly opposing legal recognition, the centre has submitted in Supreme Court that the concept of marriage between man and a woman is deeply embedded in religious and societal norms, and any interference will cause complete havoc with the delicate balance of personal laws in the country and in acceptance of societal values. In its vehement opposition, the government also submitted, calling same-sex marriage an urban elitist concept that undermines religious and social values. And in the latest affidavit, the centre filed a fresh affidavit asking the Supreme Court to make all the states and union territories in the country a part of the ongoing court proceedings. The government has also asserted the court should refrain from recognizing same-sex marriage as the issue comes within the legislative domain. The response from the top court, notably by the 5-judge bench, on the first day of the Supreme Court hearing led to jubilation and hope in the LGBTQ community. The top court said there is no absolute concept of a man or an absolute concept of a woman, and that gender is far more complex than one's genitals. The petitioner sought a direction that the right to marry a person of one's choice be extended to the LGBTQ people as part of their fundamental rights. The petitioners are now hoping that the top court interprets the existing Special Marriage Act in their favour. Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now are two of the petitioners to understand why they've taken their battle to the court. Utkarsh Saxena and Ananya Kotia, petitioner couple, join me. I appreciate Utkarsh and Ananya, both of you joining me. Utkarsh, you want to tell us what is it that led you to take this to the courts? Why did you all take this decision? A number of others have joined you, but what was for you the turning point?
There wasn't a turning point. It was a pretty organic experience. Socially, we've been noticing changes in society, more acceptance, more sensitive depictions in popular culture, in TV shows and movies. Personally, we felt like we were in a secure place. We're privileged enough to be able to take this step in such a public way and not be hurt. And legally, as your report just highlighted, there have been a lot of positive developments over the last decade where the rights for the LGBTQ community has been expanded. And as a result of these three sort of factors converging, we felt this was the right time to also now seek complete civil rights for the community.
You know, Ananya, it's interesting that one of the arguments that has been made by critics in particular, suggesting this is an urban, including the centre, of course, that this is an urban elitist concept far removed from the social ethos of this country. Did you see this in those terms at all when you all decided to petition the courts, knock the door of the Supreme Court?
Well, personally, of course, we don't feel like that, but this is an old argument. But I think one, sexuality and gender, it's a very innate concept, right? It can't be restricted to a geography or to a class. And so I think, it's not like we choose to be like this. It is who we are from birth. And there's ample scientific evidence for this. So no, I don't see this as an elite urban concept. But also, Rajdeep, I think we must understand that we're dealing with a minority where a lot of people are suppressed in fear of discrimination to hide their true identity. And therefore, one can't correlate what you see and what you hear with whether that thing exists or not. Utkarsh and I have been together for the past 15 years. And for the first 6 years of that period, we had not shared the fact that we are together, our relationship, such an integral part of our life with anyone, not with our parents, not with our best of friends. One interpretation of that could be that we don't exist, but I think that would be the wrong interpretation. In fact, we, didn't feel, we were fearful of the backlash, whether it, in the professional domain or the personal domain. And so I think a lot of people are in the closet. Maybe urban areas have a voice, and this is more visible in urban areas, but it's certainly not restricted only to urban areas. This is a universal concept which is innate to human beings.
You know, in a sense, though, Utkarsh, was 2018 the landmark judgment by the Supreme Court in the Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India decriminalizing homosexuality. Was that, in a way, did that give you more confidence? Did that give you all, as Ananya is openly and very bravely admitting that, the first years were very difficult. 15 years ago, when the two of you got together, perhaps you couldn't come and speak as openly as you can today. Is it therefore, as you said, an organic change? But do you think society has changed? Is there a greater acceptance today, given the stand particularly that governments continue to take, especially the centre?
Yeah, I think law and society are always in a catch-up game on any kind of progress or reform. So on some occasions, the law is ahead, sometimes society is ahead. In this instance, the law is taking the lead. And while society may be trailing, I think legal change certainly expedites and catalyzes social reform. So 2018 was absolutely a landmark tectonic moment. It changed a lot of lives. Once the stigma of the law was taken away, more people felt comfortable and emboldened to come out and share their realities with their families. That created the right conversations at home, a right healthy friction, which made people realize that this wasn't happening in just other people's homes, but in their own households, and allowed more people to come out for this to become a larger community that felt more comfortable being public. So absolutely, the law plays a part. And if we are successful in this litigation, I'm sure it'll also be another catalyst in this journey.
Ananya, there will be those who will say, you already are a couple. Do you really need to get married in a way to, is that important? What is the importance, you believe, the sanctity to marriage in a relationship of the kind that you have? Why is that important anymore? Need not matter, really.
Sure. I think what we are asking for is just a right to marry. Of course, we are totally okay with, if marriage is not important for certain people, that's totally okay with us as well. But I think for us, marriage matters at an emotional level and at a practical level. I think at an emotional level, like a lot of other people, we've been together, we found lifelong companionship, we are in love with each other, and the next step as we see it is to get married, to celebrate our union with our families and friends, as so many others do. We go to a lot of friends' weddings, and one day we want to have a wedding too. But I think also at a practical level, there are lots of allied rights which are linked to the concept of marriage, whether it comes to starting a family and adoption, or it comes to more financial issues like, if one of us has a job and there's a group insurance, we can't join that group insurance. If he sends me money, we have to worry about gift tax and other things. There's taxation, joint ownership of property, joint bank accounts. So I think a whole host of allied rights comes when the state recognizes your union officially. And so I think for both these reasons, marriage is very important for us. In fact, if there wasn't this legal hurdle, we've been together for 15 years, we would have been married, perhaps a very long time ago.
It's wonderful to hear these voices speaking so openly and these conversations taking place in society. Utkarsh, there will be still, though, people out there who will be extremely skeptical. As you said, the law at the moment is still a couple of steps ahead of society. Within your own wider family groups who perhaps will be a little, not so comfortable with these conversations, or do you believe that is also changing?
That is also changing, and the reason I think I'm optimistic about social change is I think a lot of the suspicion or the discomfort basically comes from a lack of exposure. A lot of my extended family relatives didn't know same-sex couples, didn't know queer people, and the more they get to know them and they realize that they're just like regular folks and their relationships are as happy, as messy, as complicated as like anyone else's, I think it just takes the sting out of them and makes them able to embrace them. And also the pace of this kind of acceptance, even in other parts of the world, has been promising. So opening this up, as you said, having more of these conversations is going to play a big part. And just giving this movement more oxygen is what's necessary to even get those who are skeptical on board. And I'm confident it will happen with time.
So Ananya, confident that the court will be on the right side of history? Is that the hope?
Well, cautiously optimistic. We're very grateful that this is getting the space that it is, that the court is hearing this, and keeping our fingers crossed and cautiously optimistic about this. Yes,
that's right. Individual rights above all else. If the Constitution guarantees you that, then you should have every right to approach the court in the manner you have. And I wish you all success, Ananya and Utkarsh, among the petitioners in this case that again could be just as landmark as decriminalizing homosexuality in 2018. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us, and hopefully we can carry forward these conversations in a similar open manner. Let's take a break at this point. When we return, we are turning to our Good News Today story, and it comes from Manchester in the United Kingdom, and it's a special one. You got to watch this. A sari and a marathon don't necessarily go against each other. We'll tell you why when we return.
As State of War Karnataka begins, a reminder who is the true number one. The 5 big voices speak to us before all the others, from Chief Minister Bommai to Chief Challenger Siddaramaiah, from old warhorse Yadurappa to muscleman DK Shivakumar and Kingmaker Kumaraswamy. When it's Karnataka, there's no competition. India's #1 election channel.